Hello, everybody. Very excited to chat about the state of the hop industry with Chris Holden of the Hop Guild. The Hop Guild is based in beautiful upstate New York, and we're about to dive into the current state of hops, the 2023 growing season, selection, contracting, and why New York hops are unique. But first, let's get to know Chris. Chris, what is the Hop Guild and what's your role there?
Yeah, so I'm the director of sales and marketing here at the Hop Guild. We're technically a grower-owned merchant, and we basically our big thing is being farm direct. So everybody that we work with, we're working directly with the growers themselves. We kind of do like pre-selections and stuff with those growers. Bring everything in here to Elmira, New York, which is in the southern tier, which is still upstate New York, and we process everything here. The majority of the stuff here in house, and warehouse it and ship right here from our facility, and basically be an outlet for brewers for both their hops, and we also do some fruit puree as well.
Now, Chris, when did you all launch the Hop Guild?
So we launched. It was late August, early September of 2018. We started talking about it about a year before that. Took a little while to kind of get an idea of what we wanted to do, how we are going to structure it, if I wanted to leave my current position and job and everything. But yeah, September 2018, right after harvest, we were rocking and rolling.
So, Chris, I'm curious, like, what is your first memory of hops? Like, when in your life did you have that initial experience?
Um, Probably it was either Ellicottville Brewing after a day of skiing, and it would have been their blueberry wheat beer, to be honest, or it was Market Street Brewing Company here in Corning, our hometown. And I was like, I don't like macro beer, but I like this stuff that they call it a pale ale, and these IPAs, like these are pretty cool. So I'd say that was probably my first experience with hops and hoppy beers, and I just kind of exploded from there and went through the whole hey, let's drink 1,000 IBUs and all that stuff.
I remember once a long time ago, before I really dove deep into hops, I visited like a sports bar in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they had this thing called Drink the Wall, which essentially was a flight of 20 different beers that my friend and I shared. She quickly realized she didn't like IPAs, so I ended up drinking every single IPA taster on there, and for better or worse, that was my introduction.
Nice.
But on a farming level, when did you first get into hops?
So farming level, we were kind of introduced to it in 2012 when the farm brewery license was kind of brought to light here in New York. Started looking into it and everything. We had a little bit of experience with it, I guess you could say, from home brewing, but not knowing like, oh, this is how they grow, this is where they grow, and all this stuff. So 2012 and 2013, we did some research to figure out what was going on with this actual industry. Why is it being talked about so much? And we decided to take a chance. Fall of 2013, start basically putting the groundwork down for the farm. We planted in 2014. So 2014 really was the first time we probably saw a hop plant, it growing, a hop cone. Otherwise, before that, it was all T90 pellets or T45 pellets that we're getting at the homebrew shop to make some homebrew with.
No, that's really interesting. And that initial farm was Crooked Creek Hops?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's my farm.
That's very cool. And you still operate it?
Yep, yeah, we still operate it today. It's still expanding slowly, and yeah, that's my I wouldn't say hobby, but it's my second job that takes up a lot of time.
We all need a little physical labor sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk like big picture hops. We're going to dive into New York in just a little bit, but on an industry level, what's going on in the world of hops?
Yeah, so right now, the hop market, it's stabilizing, but there is an oversupply of like certain varieties. There's an undersupply of certain varieties, and I think right now it's more of there was a point in time where brewers thought that they were going to continue to grow, and growers and merchants and everybody they were trying to meet demand, and overall, where the farms ended up at, the brewers didn't quite make it to that level. With certain varieties. And then also right now, I feel like there's some changes in trends too, away from hazy IPAs. Hazy IPA is still, obviously king of everything, but not quite as much maybe as it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. So again, some of those varieties are changing, but then I think there's a big push for sustainability. So there's a lot of varieties out there that people love, and they've grown to, really want to use them, but from an economical standpoint, it doesn't make sense long term, both for a grower and for a brewer. So right now we're seeing things, basically the acreage of certain things being changed over and to accommodate where the brewing industry actually is, since the hop market kind of went over top of everything, and trying to make it so that way there isn't an oversupply, prices aren't super low, aren't super high, and really make everything sustainable.
Looking at consumer taste, what are you seeing them showing preference towards these days with regards to the hop profiles?
We're seeing more and more West Coast style IPA. I don't think it'll be what it was back in, the late 2000s, early 2010s. I mean, I would love for that. I mean, that's my style, but I don't think it's going to go that far, but what I do see is there's a lot of all these new techniques and new brewing systems and equipment that have been used for hazy and juicy IPAs. A lot of that stuff is being used now for West Coast style IPAs. And West Coast style IPA really has evolved into not just one thing. There's so many different things there, which I think is great. It gives more opportunity to play with that style. Look at cold IPA. That's kind of not evolved necessarily from that, but a hybrid between that and, a hoppy Pilsner or IPL or whatever. So I think there's lots of room to play there, but also talking about Pilsners or lager, like there's a lot of lager that's coming up and a lot of really good lager that's, being made across the entire country. I mean, brewers have really figured, those different styles out. So I feel like those are the two styles that are kind of chipping away at hazy IPA. The fruited sours are still a thing too. I think that they'll be sticking around, but I think that they'll also change a little bit. I mean, they're really expensive, and if it comes down to a consumer cost base, like it might be something that they can't drink quite as much of them because they just can't afford them or whatnot.
No, that all makes sense. On a personal level, what hop varieties are you excited about right now?
I'm always a huge fan of Amarillo. Like it's always been one of my favorites. Going back to the West Coast style IPA days. Our New York Cascade has been better and better every year. Vista is probably one of our favorite ones on the farm. It's super reliable, and it just makes some really cool beer. It takes some hops that I don't even like and blending it in. It makes, from a consumer standpoint, a really good beer. The last one would be the new German Tango, a new public variety out of Germany, obviously. And, it was bred to replace Perle and Tradition, I think. And on the hot side, it definitely fits that bill. It's really good for lagers, got some herbal, noble characteristics. But on the cold side, man, the amount of passion fruit and fruit flavors that come out of it are they're phenomenal. And but going back to the growing side of that hop, the Germans are saying it's they're toting it as like the first drought resistant hop that they've ever seen, where stuff that's irrigated and non-irrigated, the health of the plant, the yield, and everything else has been about the same across the board. So I think from a grower standpoint, that's awesome. And if brewers are into that and they kind of keep up on that stuff, they should be interested in that too, because that means that the cost should be lower, and they don't have to worry about, well, am I going to be able to get this next year or not? So those are big things, I think, on both ends of the spectrum that need to be thought about going forward.
Looking at all the hop options that are out there, I remember when I first got into hops, say 15 years ago, that you almost knew all the varieties out there. You knew the flavor profiles. You knew a lot about them. Now I can't keep track of all the new hops that are popping up. Looking at, say, 15 years ago versus now, how many more hop varieties have we added to the repertoire of what's being offered?
I don't even know. It's a lot. I mean, that's supposed to be my job, and I can't keep up with some of the stuff, and it's huge. It's a lot. I do actually, a good question I get asked all the time. Brewers are like, do we really need more hop varieties? And I'm like, well, technically no, but what we do need is those flavor characteristics you're looking for with this, and this that grow like this, and this. And I think that is kind of the way that most of the breeding programs have shifted. They've stopped being like, okay, well, let's replace Cascade. Well, Cascade grows well. Like, we don't necessarily have to replace that. But you've got these other hops that aren't growing all that well. So let's find that flavor profile that grows like a Vista, like a Tango, and some of the new breeding or proprietary stuff out there, like Idaho 7 does really, really well. Aroma is another hop out of Montana that is like, it's killer. Like, it's huge. It's disease resistant. It's super high oil, all this stuff. So there's like all these different things that you could say that there are reasons for new varieties to come along. But I do think that those new varieties have to fit the bill that brewers are looking for to replace them on the brewing side,
If you had to make a prediction of those new varieties that we'd see more of the next few years and really stick around, which one, 2, 3, do you think we'd kind of see a lot more of?
I think you're going to see more Vista for sure being public. There's a lot of talk about public breeding and public hops in general, and the fact that, anybody can grow it. So, you could be a big farm in Yakima, Oregon, or Idaho, and you can grow it. And the growers that we talk to out there that are growing it, they love it. You could be a little farm like myself here in New York and be growing it, Michigan, wherever. And like, there's some cool stuff to be said about that, where, your regional craft brewers, they might want that. They want something more local or regionalized. Aroma has been a really big one for us, and I think it has some legs.
That one's just fun to say.
It is. It's different. But yeah, I think that, what we smelled, when I first smelled it, I was just like, holy crap. Like, and I didn't want to get too excited about it, but after talking more and more with brewers and people smelling it, they're like, man, this thing's pretty cool. And I think it still has time to figure out where it needs to go. But it's been one that we've been really excited about over the last few months. And then kind of shifting gears, I think some lager hops that are coming out, stuff like Contessa from Steiner. That's been a really cool one. That's got some really nice, unique, noble characteristics that are just a little bit more amped up, say, compared to like Hallertau Mittelfrüh. And I think that's going to help out too, because it grows super well. And that's something that I do see finally a lot of lager breweries that are like, well, I want Satz, or I need Satz, or this or that. They are starting to be like, oh, wow, like some of these hops are not sustainable at all. It's just the heritage that they've had for the last maybe 100 years or so, or more with certain ones, right? But I think that's a big shift there, that people are starting to look outside of that noble realm and the noble like hops. And I'm all for that, because those are the varieties that, the grower needs more of, but less acreage, but there's not a lot used in the kettle. So, it doesn't need to be something that's super, super low in price, but it needs to be affordable for them, and it needs to make sense for a grower.
And, as the hop industries continue to evolve, you all have put out a pretty cool product. Tell us a little bit more about Hop Sauce.
Yeah, so Hop Sauce was something that somewhat fell on our lap. We basically had a CO2 extraction system that we had available to us from the hemp industry back 4 years ago now. We started tinkering around with it, and we looked at what we could do with it. It's like, okay, well, do we want to do bittering with this? And it's like, well, we're not in a bittering market. We're a small company. So we had to find something for, aroma, obviously. And the more and more we played with it, we finally came up with a product that, was pretty flowable at room temps, and was one of the first things that was like, oh, this makes it easy. And then also the oils were so much higher. And our alpha acids were, they were decent, but the oil content was so much higher, and people could use it in the brewing process itself. So recently we've invested into, a new facility basically for that, and some new equipment. So we can, basically mass produce it, keep up with demand. And it's a perfect Whirlpool edition product, as well as primary fermentation. We have a lot of guys that use it there, which is a pretty cool spot to play around with it. And it's a perfect replacement for T90s for those two spots, basically, instead of having to put the T90 pellets in and lose all that, wort and beer from the vegetal matter. It really helps out on that end for breweries looking to be conscientious of the money that they're spending or losing.
I imagine it makes cleanup a little bit easier too.
Yeah, it's as long as it's used correctly. Every now and then I get a phone call and they're like, "This is supposed to be super easy," and they maybe missed a step, which there's not a lot of steps, but it sometimes it takes a couple times to figure out what's the best way to use it, especially just like with any new product, it takes a little practice. So, but yeah, once the practice is down, we've had no issues with cleaning it up at all.
And I imagine it's probably a little cheaper to ship as well.
Yeah, a lot smaller containers. I mean, we've got, here's a container right here. This is a 0.5 kilo, but basically 2 of those would make up a little bit more than a single bag of hops. So, the shipping's a lot smaller. I mean, if you're shipping a pallet of pellets, it'd be like 3 cases that's filled up with this. So it's a huge game changer on that end.
Well, I imagine then you're not only saving on shipping, but also saving on storage space.
Yeah, if brewers are paying attention to that, and I think that's one thing we've seen recently. Well, especially with COVID, you had everybody going from stuff that was in and out with kegs, and then all of a sudden it's all cans, and they got to store it there. They didn't have any room for stuff, and we were always wondering during COVID, like why is everybody behind? Why don't they have anything in stock? And it's because they had no room in their cooler to be able to do anything with, so they were ordering last minute. So yeah, this takes up a heck of a lot more room. We're doing trials right now to see what the degradation looks like at room temperature instead of actually storing it in the cooler, which so far it's pretty good. But we do want to get a little bit more time on it before we say, hey, this doesn't need to be chilled anymore or whatever.
No, that's really, really interesting. So if anyone's looking to learn more about hop sauce, where can they check that out on your website?
There's a tab at the top that says hop sauce. Go right down there. That should give you all the information. We got some new infographics on there to kind of streamline all the information that we have on our user guide. Instead of it being all in words, there's some pictures and everything, so you can figure that out. Or they can contact their sales manager, the regional sales manager, and they can kind of walk them through it as well.
And that's at the HOPGUILD.com. It's at the HOPGUILD.com. But now I really want to dive into what's going on in New York. I love upstate New York. I'm not just telling you this because you live there. It's one of my favorite parts of the country that I've ever visited. I really didn't know it existed until I first had the opportunity to explore. The region you're in is beautiful. So talk to me about hop growing and what people can expect when they visit, upstate.
Yeah, so depending on when they're visiting, obviously right now it's great, especially if they're down south. They can come up here and escape some of the really, really hot weather. We get some of that, but it cools off in the middle of the night. So like right now is a great time to go, lake hopping on the Finger Lakes basically, and lots of brewery tours and wine tours going on. Adirondacks is gorgeous this time of year. Lots of tourism going on up there. And then, the Great Lakes, both Lake Ontario and Lake Erie are cool areas as well. I've not explored Long Island myself all that much, but the couple times I've been out there, it's really, really awesome. It's a different world than what I thought it was. Yeah, I need to get out there more myself right now.
Honestly, I prefer the small towns myself, so I'm more likely to come up your way.
Yeah, so when it comes to kind of the farming side, we're kind of spread out. Basically around the Finger Lakes. So the Finger Lakes it's got a lot of really heavy clay, so it's not really great for growing hops. That's why the grapes grow so well there. But around it, south of there, we get lots of silt. We got some sand, gravel, all this stuff's really good drainage. North of there, it's usually a combination of silt clay, and silt sand, or loam basically. So there's some really good growing areas north and south. A lot of that was dairy south of the Finger Lakes, which is turning over to more crop farming now. And then north of the Finger Lakes, there's some dairy, but a lot of it was crop farming. It's huge crop growing region. So a lot of our farms are either north of the Finger Lakes or south of the Finger Lakes, basically. And so we're spread out a little bit. That also makes it interesting because then we're in these, biodomes or biochasms that it creates all these different flavors that we can get from each farm that our brewers get to select from and really dial in some different recipes. But we do get some uniqueness, like using Cascade, for example. We get across the board, we have this like wild berry, dewberry type aromatics and flavor to it that just we don't get from anyone else's Cascade across the country or the world, I should say. And as well as, the traditional grapefruit, some tropical notes in there or whatever too. So that's what we like about New York. And the same thing with the wine. I mean, we kind of can follow what the wine is, what's happened with the wine industry and why the Finger Lakes wine region is so, special and unique with, with our hops here.
So you mentioned earlier some of your favorite hops to drink, but what are your favorite hops to grow?
So Vista's been pretty cool to grow. I ain't gonna lie. It's easy to grow. It just it's a beast. So taking care of it, manucuring it in the spring, it takes a little bit more time. But we like that. Another one that we've been playing with is Ricao or Alpha Aroma, which is a New Zealand variety, which is pretty neat. It grows really, really fast. Very little issues that we've seen so far with it. But I would say our favorite to grow on our farm ever is Triumph. Triumph's been the easiest going hop, just all across the board. The amount of work in the spring, easy to harvest, easy to dry. It's just a simple hop in general, to be honest with you.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So looking at all the growers the Hop Guild works with, approximately how many are in your network?
So here in New York, we've got like 11, 12 that are, we consider guild growers. We've got a couple other outlet growers that are, selling certain stuff to us, or we're contracting certain stuff with them here in New York. And then we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 other farms in the Pacific Northwest. We have one main farm in Germany with a couple other outlet farmers, growers there in Germany. Main farm being in Tettnang, and the outlet growers being in the Hallertau region. And then we have one outlet that we work with in New Zealand, which is the Clayton Brothers. But most of the hops from their outfit come from the Battery Hill farm.
Neat. So how would you, Chris, compare like New York's harvest to some of the other growing regions around the world? Like you just mentioned, the Pacific Northwest, Germany. Like how does New York's harvest compare?
So for most of us, we've got, I'd say it's a little bit more spread out. So we can, like, for instance, on our farm, we've got a variety that in two weeks we'll probably start, and we'll harvest that for the day, but we won't be harvesting anything else until the end of the month. And then we'll probably be harvesting for 7-8 days straight. And then we'll be down for probably 2 or 3 weeks until our Vista and Ricao are ready to go. So it's spread out, but it's a little less strenuous, compared to other places where the Pacific Northwest, usually as soon as they start, they're harvesting every day, usually, until they're done, and it could be 40, 45 days of straight harvest, where ours is, it might be spread out over 45 days, but it's not every single day.
Cool. Now, I'd love to understand a little bit more about the scale of New York, hop growers. Like how many acres would you guess, are growing hops in New York State?
I don't know the total amount, but amongst our guild growers, we're about 125 to 130 right now. I'll have a better understanding. I got some reports I'm waiting on to know what's actually being harvested this year compared to what was strung. But that's about where we're at right now. Average size farm is roughly the same as what it is in Germany, which is, between 2.5 to 5 hectare, which is, 5 to 10 acres or so around that area.
So approximately how many pounds of hops are those farms going to produce that you just mentioned in New York?
Probably a little under 100,000 pounds this year.
Wow. That's a lot of hops.
Yeah.
It must be really awesome to just watch this hop industry grow in New York. I mean, being part of it, looking back when you first got into it to versus where you are now, like what surprised you the most? Like what's been, a key ingredient for your success? Any unique observations of your time in the industry, just kind of specifically on New York State?
Yeah. So obviously we got into it for the farm breed license, but what we saw starting out, we were getting our specifically our farm, we were getting a lot of attention from non-farm breed licensed breweries. And so that kind of spawned me to go after that, maybe some larger regional size craft brewers. And to be honest with you, those are the guys that, they're some of our best partners today that we have. And I think that what we saw was the people that were using, New York hops were the people that wanted to use New York, not because they were being told because of a license and whatnot. And that's actually what we're seeing now outside of the state too, where we have people in Pennsylvania and Maryland and a little bit in Florida and, the Carolinas and Massachusetts and all these other places where they're like, we like your New York hops. Like, we want your New York hops. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we bring, New York hops in general, bring a uniqueness to, the market, whether you want to say it's exotic or traditional or, whatever. There's something to be said that, people end up liking what we're growing. And if they find a home for it, that's where a lot of the stuff is going right now.
And New York State used to be one of the top growing states in the 1800s. I believe they were number one at one point.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the late 1800s into the early 1900s, if I remember correctly, they're still the single largest growing region ever. I'd have to I got to double check that against what Yakima did a couple years ago, but it's really close either way. They didn't produce the same amount of, pounds, but yeah, it was like, I'm pretty sure it's the single largest growing region ever. And then, through World War II, that kind of fizzled away. And there was a little uptick in the 1950s and in the early 1960s. There was 500 or 600, maybe 750 acres at that point in time. And a lot of people say what they want to say, this or that. But during that time, the issue was everybody else in Germany and out west, they were modernizing everything. So there was equipment being added. New York never had any equipment. So the issue there obviously is trying to find 200 people that are willing to come out and pick hops by hand every single day is a little difficult. So long story short, that's kind of what killed it in the 1960s, I think, at the end of the day. And Rick Peterson started back up in 1999. I think it was Ithaca Brewing came to him, was like, hey, can you grow some hops? Because he was growing vegetables for their brewery. And he started growing in 1999, and he's taken off ever since. And we work with Rick now, and it's been a great relationship.
So will New York become a major hop growing region again? Or should I say, when will New York become a major hop growing region again?
I don't ever expect it to be back in our lifetime to what it was back in the 1800s. I think that there is the capacity for it. With climate change and everything else, I mean, it could either help us out, help the state. I shouldn't say help us out, but help the state out with the potentials for that. But I could see New York being, taking over Michigan probably as number 2, and maybe getting into, the 4-figure acre area. I don't think it'll rival Idaho and Oregon. But I think that it could be up there and be, the staple number 4 growing region for, generations and generations.
That's not too shabby, my friend.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what do you like best about being a grower?
Tractor therapy. I grew up playing in the dirt. I raced motocross. I love the dirt, and I get to do that now, and to be honest with you, out of all the crops I ever see, I grew up on the farm that are where we're growing now, but we did like Timothy hay, and it's like, okay, well, you watch the Timothy hay grow up, it's just a grass, right? It's nothing like super rewarding about that, but seeing a crop that starts off as just this little itty bitty thing coming out of the ground, then it turns into this big old monster of a jungle by the time you harvest. Like, it's like, I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it, and to sit there and be like, holy crap, like we did that, it's pretty cool.
I think using progress as a motivator is a really cool thing. Just watching something grow and just, wow, I helped with that is a really neat feeling.
Yeah. And it happens quick. So like, that's the other thing. It just, I'm like, we're doing harvest prep right now in the evenings, and it's like, man, like, I don't really want to deal with it. Like, I don't care for harvest, to be honest with you, because I feel like it's demolition at that point in time. And it's just like, oh yeah, all this stuff that we worked on, it's all going to be gone. And, but yeah, it's pretty cool crop to grow. I think, I don't know if I could grow many other crops. I mean, corn, if you get like 14-foot tall corn, I mean, that'd be pretty cool, but that happening year after year, I think would be pretty difficult.
So you mentioned you don't love, harvest season. Is that your least favorite thing about being a grower? Is there one task or something that you just despise more than others?
Yeah, I think Harvest is probably my least favorite. Yeah, it's because again, like I said, it's you're just demolishing what you're doing in the field, and then I mean, I guess the rewarding part is when you've got all the hops sitting in the conditioner, and it's like, oh, you got a mountain of stuff in here. That's pretty cool. But again, like I said, you look out and you see a field with all this foliage, and then all of a sudden, 2 days later, it's completely gone. It's like, damn, like that's a lot of work right there.
That's absolutely a lot of work. Now, a minute ago, you mentioned your love for tractors. You talked about how you had previous experience in motocross, and Brewers also love forklifts. If you had to rank those three, is vehicles, I guess, the right term? I guess it's the right term. If you had to rank them from favorite to least favorite, it's only three. What would it be?
We have a really old forklift here. We call it Clarky because Clark forklift, and it's you have to shift it. It's got gear shift with a clutch. I don't know if I could put that as number one, but it's up there. But tractors are probably one of my favorites. Racing motocross, it was fun, but it's also I had a lot of broken bones. It was pretty tough sport to be successful in. So I'm going to put that number 3 as the most dangerous. Tractor's probably number 1, and then the forklift number 2.
Have you ever been in a tractor accident?
No.
That's a good thing.
Luckily, no.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about like New York hops. When do you feel they first started coming back commercially, and why have they been successful?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, in 1999, when Rick started growing, and then it was kind of up and down. It sounded like I've talked to him more and more about his history and growing them, and he said it was just a hobby that got out of hand, and I could see that. And there was years that he let them sit dormant, and he didn't do anything with them. And I think that with him, he was in a good position when the farm brewery license here started. He had everything there. He had the infrastructure, and he's been kind of like the godfather for this area, to be honest. And it makes sense. I think that they really took off when we started seeing the growers mature and the industry here just mature. And what I mean by that is, there was a lot of, and I think it still happens in other states, probably even in Washington and Oregon and Idaho, but you get these smaller growers that don't quite have an understanding of the industry or what they are. And they show up at a brewery with a black plastic bag, and there's molding rotted hops in the bag, and brewers are like, what is this? And there was a lot of that happened here in New York, to be completely honest. And it kind of sucks. And it really gave some of the guys that were doing a really good job a bad name, right? Because they're just kind of relating the two together. And I think that once, there was a couple different organizations here in New York. There's ourselves, and there was another bigger farm, and I think it was the Vineyard. The three of us kind of traveling around, and people like, oh crap, like we've got people that are actually doing this for a living here now. And we consistently showed up at breweries here probably over the last 2, 3, 4 years with really good stuff. So I would say probably between 3 and 4 years ago, probably 2019 is when it really started to take off. A little bit of a hit with COVID, obviously, because we couldn't travel and people reverted back to what they knew, obviously. And then it's been kind of an uphill climb since then, but a good uphill climb. And that's when we really started seeing it mature quickly. So I would say, 2019 was the start of it, and it was really starting to happen in 2021.
And Chris, how have you and the Hop Guild been able to best educate those outside of, say, New York State about the value of New York hops?
Hiring awesome salespeople that are just as genuinely and, interested in hops as they are beer, and being able to talk the language, I think is the biggest thing. Also stuff like this. I mean, you guys taking the time to do this with us and being able to spread that word a little bit. This is, these are big things here, but, spending a lot of time and effort on the road, and marketing our stuff and giving people the ability to see the best of what we've got, and I feel like we, as a company, we don't bring really anything bad in, but if we can always strive to give them the best of what we have, that's, it's a good look,
Indeed. So 2 rapid fire questions for you. What hop is New York going to produce the most of this year?
Cascade.
And which ones are you all going to struggle with keeping up with demand?
Vista and Cascade, to be honest, both of them. Yeah, Vista, I think is just because it's so new. The acreage is in the ground now, I think. So we should be good next year. But I think it's just new plantings is what it is right now. Cascade, it's like a revolving door. I feel like, we go through waves that, we've had good years the last 2-3 years growing wise. The issue is, I think that our sales have outpaced what we've been able to do. And to be honest, a lot of growers are very timid about planting Cascade because what we're going through right now also happened back in 2013 when all the farm breweries were like, well, we need Cascade. And then that kind of died and now it's coming back again. So I think, asking people to plant Cascade it has been difficult, to be honest. But where Vista, it's like, yeah, it's a great new hop, blah, blah, blah. Just do this and this and you're good to go, which is the same thing with Cascade. It just something shiny and new is easier to, to get a grower to try out than it is for something that's been around for a while.
No, that all makes sense. Now, that kind of leads nicely into like hop contracts. Give me like the lowdown, like, what people need to know, what brewers need to know about hop contracts right now.
Yep. So it's a touchy subject, obviously. And we're our sales team we're having maybe biweekly meetings about contracts right now because it's a touchy subject when it comes to certain things, certain varieties. Contract and I think the first thing that everybody needs to know and realize that contracts are there to help sustain everything, both for the brewers and for the growers. And personally, I feel like there's been some bad contracting out there on from both ends of the spectrum, and it comes down to just working with your suppliers, whoever your supplier is, being like, hey, if it was the brewers, if it was the brewers, I want to say fault, but it was on the brewers end that or the brewery end that something happened, then they just need to communicate and just be like, hey guys, I screwed up. Like, what can we do? And I would hope that the supplier is going to help, because if you're being honest, then, try to do something to fix it. It might take more than a year or two to fix it, but hey, sometimes that's what happens, from a growing end, we only get one chance a year, basically, where the brewers can brew every week or every day. Now, if it's on the supplier side that push something, blah, 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 then I feel like they're the ones that got to kind of be like, okay, well, we'll fix this, so it goes both ways. But it's also on the supplier side to make sure that they're doing their due diligence and being like, what's your, if the contract is for something that's been stable for a while, great. If it's something for a growth period, let's do some more, maybe put some more clauses in there and customize the contract a little bit more. But contracts overall, they're there to help sustain everything, get good pricing and the hops or the hop lots that, brewers need. And they're there for the grower to make sure that, hey, if I'm putting this in the ground and I'm not going to see an ROI for 2 or 3 years, like I got to make sure that makes sense, and that's kind of where like the Cascade stuff that we're just talking about comes into play, is like, if we have stuff to back it up, they're all for it. But if there's not, they're very timid. But, I think contracting right now is something that brewers should actively be trying to do something with it. And I was talking with Carrie.
Carrie Shumway, one of my favorite people.
Yes, last month.
Craft Brewery Finance.
And I made a comment, and he's like, I really like that. And it's like, we contract, right? We have to contract stuff. We have to contract hops. We have to contract fruit. We have to contract boxes and containers and bags and everything else. And it's like, yeah, we've overshot and undershot a lot. But the thing is it's a practice. If you don't practice that, whether you're right or wrong every year, you're never going to get better at it. I think I hear a lot right now with brewers where they're tired of wanting to do a contract. And it's like, okay, you goofed up or they goofed up, whatever, it is what it is, right? You got to work through it. And then the next year you try to do a better job. And the next year after that, you try to do a better job. And you get to the point where there's going to be, maybe 1 out of 10 times that it's like spot on, and you're going to be like, yeah. And you're going to be clanking glasses and having a good time. But if you're within 5% on both ends, I mean, it's usually pretty obtainable, I think, with that, and it's, that's kind of the end goal, is making sure that, again, it's sustainability on the backside.
A bunch of really good tips there, Chris. So, for everyone listening today, and there's a lot going on in the world of hops right now. What's the one takeaway that you hope people remember from this conversation, or just about what's going on in hops or New York, or however you'd like to focus that?
I think the sustainability side, a lot of what we talked about today, we didn't really talk about sustainability, but a lot of it there was sustainability kind of within the background of that. And whether it's a product, whether it's contracts, whether it's certain varieties, like there's a lot of, there needs to be more talk of that. I feel like, whether it's on the grower end or the brewer end or whatever, but sustainability, I feel like should be the number one goal on both ends of the spectrum. From my standpoint as a grower, I've got kids that are getting, I got a 5 and 9-year-old that they hate the farm, but they also, guess what? We were up there yesterday all day and they didn't complain a single bit. And they're just like, well, what can we do, Daddy? What else do we got to do? And in the back of their heads, they know they like it, they enjoy it. But like I am looking at those, one of them, two, or both of them taking it over. Just like the generational farmers in Germany or in Washington, Oregon, like these guys have been doing it for decades or centuries at this point in time, right? So I look at that side, but I also look at breweries that have been around for a long time, whether they're big or small. We know small breweries that have been around for 3-4 decades now. And yeah, some of them, their kids are taking over, or maybe they're not. They're selling to someone else. But like, that's kind of how I look at it. I don't want to be walking into a pub, when I'm retired, 65, 70 years old, and paying $20 a pint of beer. I don't want that.
Please take that back, Chris. Please take that back.
But it's like I want to be able to go in and buy it at a sustainable price, and at the end of the day, that starts now. It started yesterday, and it needs to start tomorrow if it hasn't already started. So I feel like that's the big takeaway that we would like to see, and I see that from our company standpoint too. We have invested the time and the effort, and to make sure that our company is here standing for a long time down the road, because farming and agriculture is a long-term investment, I feel like, and that's what we need to, that's what we need to have. And I know that some brewers out there, quite a few of them that I know at this point in time, like that's what they've done, and that's what they're doing too. They are planning on being around for a very long period of time, whether that long period is only 20 years or if that long period is 50 or 60, or, I'm sure if they make it to the 100-year mark or whatever, they're going to be pumped. But that's my big takeaway, is looking at sustainability.
And a follow-up to that, do you have any tips of how we can incorporate sustainability better in our business models?
Yeah, it's on the contracting side, it's research on that, right? So I would say, kind of following up with that is researching what you really need to do, planning ahead, try not to fly by the seat of your pants all the time. Both on, from our side, we try to coach that with our growers, because that's what we try to do here is have at least a footprint of what we want to try to do. Obviously, you're going to deviate from it a little bit, but the brewers can do the same thing. It's like, hey, these are the beers that we're brewing at this point in time. And it also, from the brew deck all the way down to their sales team, it should help, everything out on their end if that's the case. And hopefully that helps out with contract scheduling, and then you can incorporate other things in there that are going to help out with, better profit margins or whatever. And that's kind of the secondary part to that.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing all your insight today, just on the hop industry, teaching me more about New York hops, sharing about hop sauce, and everybody can go to thehopguild.com to learn more. And Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think it's pretty good. I appreciate you guys, Andrew, you let me on here and doing this, and everybody that ends up watching. Appreciate you guys as well. Look forward, if you guys ever have any questions or whatever, feel free to reach out, whether it's about hops in general or you just want to bull crap. I can go down a tunnel about all this stuff all day long, so I'm all for it.
Awesome, Chris. Well, appreciate you. Hope to share pints before too long, and have a great rest of the summer. Cheers.
Sounds good.